Hello, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar on creating and running safer online classrooms with me, Beverly Clark, as your host and Holly Billinghurst as your presenter. I am the CAS National Community Manager responsible for the management and delivery of the Computing at School CAS Community of Practice programme as a part of the NCCE, which is a National Centre for Computing Education. This webinar is part of a series of webinars designed to support the CAS community with remote working and delivery. It is a part of the CAS Inspire program. During the session, please use the question window on the right-hand side of your screen to ask questions. The top of the window has an orange rectangle which can be expanded or collapsed. There is also a copy of the webinar notes available to download during this session, and Holly will direct you to those later on. If using social media, please use the hashtag CAS Inspire 20 altogether to tweet or on Twitter or a post on social media, Facebook. Okay, I'm now going to hand you over to Holly, who will take you through the session. So swapping presenters to Holly. And there we go.
Hello. Okay, I am just about to go and share my screen, so if you could bear with me just a second. Let's make sure you have got the presentation. There it is. So you should be able to now see the CAS presentation. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pop over our monitor. So Beverly, can I just double check that you can see that all running and
Yes, I can, Holly.
Marvelous stuff. Okay, right, so welcome to Running Safer Online Classrooms. You should be able to see on your webinar that you have a questions section. Please do, as we go through, pop in your questions or your comments in there. We are aware that the chat isn't working, so if you have anything that you want to say to anybody within the webinar, pop it straight in the questions. So we'll be using the questions area a little bit like it is a chat area. And what I will try and do is I will try and come back to those questions in as much detail as I possibly can. So this is the second of the webinars that I am presenting, and hopefully we are going to be able to not give you death by PowerPoint, but we're going to start off by what it is that I'm hoping to address in the next hour for you. So I'm going to be looking at addressing some of the safeguarding concerns, because I know that lots of teachers and schools have expressed some safeguarding concerns in terms of running live face-to-face lessons. And we're going to be looking at some of the ways that you can actually address those as well. Also looking at behaviour concerns and how you can transport using your standard behaviour policies from how you would normally do that in a physical classroom into a digital environment. And also looking at some of the safeguarding issues around recording sessions, and also what to do in terms of data protection and students also using their tools to record lessons. So I thought we would start with a bit of a starter, seeing as you are all teachers. And this is a real scenario for you. So this is something that I actually received as part of my LinkedIn messages. This popped up to me, and it suddenly dawned on me that we have been teaching for almost several decades now, the online safety aspects to our students. And all of a sudden, because we're now working in a digital environment, lots of this is starting to crop up for us personally. So this was the initial thing that I received. I'm going to get you to pop into the questions. What seems wrong to you here? Why do you think this sent almost sort of massive alarm bells for me? So as you are typing that in, I will show you the next message. So after I had this with the link to an online, you can see I have blanked out who this was from. Unfortunately, their account had been compromised. This was the next one, so I just popped in there that I wasn't sure whether the account had been compromised or not. And then I got, it's a financial proposal. Oh, brilliant. Okay, so I'm just going to open up the questions a little bit more so I can see them slightly better. Yeah, so we've got confidential project proposal, grammar errors, clicking links. So obviously the first thing I did was say, that's lovely, you've got a proposal for me, can you put it directly in here? I got sure, and sure enough, they never contacted me again. So I thought this was a really useful one to actually start off with, because we're looking at some of the issues that we've been talking to our students about for a very long time. The majority of the safeguarding issues that we are aware of are actually things we've been teaching as part of e-safety, digital literacy for a really, really long time. However, one thing that I have done is to talk to a number of tutors who have been running lots of live group classes, and in fact large group classes for a very long time, and I got some of their top tips. So I've been running online groups for the last 2 years, but I didn't want to just give you what I do, I wanted to give you a scenario from absolutely everybody. So starting with a waiting room, and I'm going to introduce waiting rooms. So if you were with me last week, I looked at waiting rooms then, but I'm also going to talk about those today. Because of the waiting rooms, nobody comes in without your permission. So also insisting our students log in with recognizable screen names. So this actually stops people from handing out your link and then coming in, or rather than stopping, it reduces the risk. Starting with everybody muted. So just like we've got here, I'm able to present to you. So even if there is noise in the background where you are, you have the ability there to be able to present and for people to be able to listen to you and not be interrupted by lots of noise going on in the background. And also being able to use the hands up. So we've got the questions here. We do actually have a hands up facility in the GoToWebinar, which is rather useful. And I believe we actually have a hands up from Kirsty, which is really cool. So what I would do is I would then click off that hands up, I would get them to type in their question, and then we can carry on. Also using some of the built-in software to block things like students being able to automatically screen share. So that means that if you are sharing your screen, like I am today, you would prevent a student from taking over and sharing their screen. So you actually have to give them permission. And some of us have been using breakout rooms for group work, and that's available in a number of applications now. But being aware that a breakout room stops you from being able to monitor what those students are doing. So if you do use them, popping those into spot. Now we have a question from Kirsty, and I'm going to get Beverly to double check that for us because we have a technical question. Are you all right to just give
Yes,
Kirsty a
I can.
hand with her sound? Thank you. Okay, so
yes. Carry on, Holly.
Is that
I'll
okay?
answer Kirsty directly in the chat question window.
Brilliant. And we're also going to consider cameras as a potential risk, because that is something that we have talked about with a lot of people. So what I'm going to do throughout the presentation is something that you are probably going to need to do as teachers anyway, which is actually to create a risk assessment. So I've used a table on this one and adapted it a little bit. So most of us are really used to using these for things like trips. And if we are going to put out our live lessons, then we want to consider actually presenting these as risk assessments. So in this case, we are going to use a bit of a color coding system, and I have adapted it so that we have our minor. So minor would be no impact at all, or something very, very small. Anything moderate would require you to actually put together a safeguarding report. That might just be an email to somebody in SLT. Serious would be a clear impact on mental health. A student may be particularly affected, distress may be caused, or it may cause our students students do not want to attend those particular classes with us. And then major would be that students would have some kind of significant mental health impact. We could put them in actual danger, physical danger, or they may refuse to attend lessons full stop because of the situation that happened. So in this case, we've used the care, caution, alert and stop that we would see for most of our risk assessments. So hopefully this chart is reasonably familiar for you. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to have a look at, I'm going to take this section by section, is the actual tools that we use. And the first thing is our student video. So there are a number of potential issues with student video. The first one obviously is distraction. So I have to hand a complete hats off to the teacher last week who kept a straight face while one of their students actually sat through the entire lesson in a raptor mask, which was absolutely fabulous, but a massive distraction. It wasn't a safeguarding risk, but it was a risk to actually impacting on the lesson. There's also the background. Now, as somebody who's been tutoring for the last 2 years online, I've actually lost count of the number of times parents have walked behind the cameras with dressing gowns on, or a couple of weeks ago we had a tutor who had a mum walk past in a bikini with a bottle of wine at 9 AM in the morning, which sounded like a fabulous idea, but not in the middle of a lesson. So the majority of this is quite funny, but there is the issue of actually maybe seeing something in the background which is not appropriate, or actually considering that students are quite often logging on from places like their bedroom, or they're not appropriately dressed. So I've certainly had to stop lessons where students have logged on from their bedrooms. I have stopped the lesson, said we're not using cameras, please go away, please log back on again once you are prepared for your lesson. So setting those boundaries really, really early is something which really helps us in terms of making sure that student video, because when we are looking at this, we probably want to put that in an alert section. So the distress caused is probably going to be moderate. If we have a student which is not appropriate dress, or we have something in the background, the potential is there for distress or safeguarding requirements. But the likelihood of just having disruption is quite probable. We know our students quite well. So in terms of allowing videos, there are positives and negatives to this. You know, we are creating our personal connections. I've put there, I really miss my face-to-face students, and I'm sure you do too. So actually giving them that connection to be able to communicate with us, communicate with friends, is quite powerful. However, we also need to be aware that it does cause an awful lot of additional bandwidth. And also, while we're teaching, video can be distracting. And when they are in large groups, it's very, very difficult for us to keep an eye on their videos and also focus on what we're trying to teach. So actually, when I have groups where I have more than 6 students, I actually have all of their videos just switched off. Potentially 5 minutes at the beginning to say hello. If we are using videos, at that point, everything gets switched off. We're in the lesson, no videos at that point, because that allows me to focus my teaching energy on actually teaching. And answering their questions. So a little bit like what we're doing here. They're able to put their questions in as they come up. And a lot of our VoIP applications will allow us to have individual questions which just go to us, or questions to the whole group. And that's really helpful, especially when students don't really want to say something out loud. Okay. One thing that I am going to do, and I'm going to return to this, is that we need to be aware, especially with student videos on, is that anybody can take a screen capture of your live lesson. And if you have student videos on and if you have their names on the screen, it can cause a potential issue. So it's worthwhile being aware of this. So saying videos are off just takes away that risk from us. I did want to put something on here. I had a little look on Twitter, and again, I have anonymized this because it made me make a face. So this particular thing came up. All I did was to search in Zoom lesson, and the first thing that came up was a teacher who had taken a picture of their screen and tweeted it in just a lovely tweet saying, "Goodness me, well look at this lovely thing that's happened in my class." And unfortunately, the first thing that I looked at went, "Oh no, you've just taken a photo and put it on social media of all of these students." And I looked in there, looked at all of the different distractions that were happening. And at the top there, we can see there is a parent taking a photo of the whole thing. We have a child in a disturbing mask. And the thing that really, really picked up was there is a massive spider at the bottom there. And of course, that was hugely distracting for me. I'm actually going to get you to use the questions again. So I wanted to ask the question, should you tweet or should this teacher have tweeted their lesson capture? There certainly are questions that we haven't asked at this point. We haven't asked whether they actually had permission. Potentially this was a group of people who were creating a class and they all had permission to send this out. But we simply don't know. So we are inferring some knowledge onto this. Absolutely. So Natalie's in there said no, safeguarding, permissions, data protection, names down the side. Absolutely. I balked at this because I saw safeguarding all over it. Data protection, absolutely. We shouldn't be putting out names to everybody else. And actually data protection we will come back to as well, specifically for student names. And when I say we come back to it, it's next. So in terms of student names, this is more of a data protection risk in terms of if we are broadcasting to students' homes. We don't really want to be using their full names because we simply don't know who is watching. And it's worthwhile being aware that in very, very small cases, broadcasting a student's full name to somebody else may put them in danger. We should be already aware of any of our students who need to be kept particularly safeguarded in terms of not sharing their names out, but just in case, because we don't know what's going on at home. So in this case, I have put this down into a caution because it's very, very unlikely the student's full name will be an issue to be seen by their classmates, but because we don't know who is watching, the impact may well be significant because there may be an issue in terms of a risk to life in some cases. So one of the ways that I deal with this, specifically in my groups, is to consider using pseudonyms. So we get to use this and embed some of our e-safety lessons. This is stuff we've been teaching for years. We get them to create safe screen names in their e-safety lessons. And this is part of your digital literacy. And at that point, what we can do is we can then embed these into, firstly, they join our classes using their pseudonym. They can use all of our online digital resources. So this particular one I was doing, in fact, I've just cut out a few of my strange screen names that I use. And you can use these for, so this one was in MakeCode, they use the same name in Kahoot, they use the same name for logging into the lesson as well. And there's the other thing of allowing students to choose from a list of appropriate names. It very much depends on obviously what age group you are teaching, but we all know that potentially some of our students might choose names which are not entirely appropriate. So therefore, we're actually going to come back to managing their student names in just a second. I'm going to give you some code that you can use to generate some appropriate screen names, but using the same ones, almost like a register, allows you to refer to them directly, but without using their full name. First names are fine. You may want to just use first names for absolutely everything. It might make life easier, certainly makes it more personal. However, we tend to teach them not to use their real names online. So what we're doing now is we are practicing what we preach. So waiting rooms, and I promised you that I would come back to waiting rooms. Can I just get you to pop me, I don't think you can do a thumbs up, but you can certainly do a hands up. have you used a waiting room in any of your meeting applications so far? Obviously, aside from today, when you were put into a meeting room before we started. Okay, I've got 3 so far. Okay, so waiting rooms are there to allow you to manage your meetings a little bit better in terms of if you've got a meeting open, they then have to wait until you open the door. Think about this as your physical classroom. This is a digital room which you have created, and you are not allowing your class to come in until you are prepared, which means that you're not having to make sure everything is ready before you even click go. So it allows you to set up things like your screen share. It allows you to make sure everything is closed down, and then at the time of the lesson, then you can let them in. So this is what mine looks like. The other thing that this does, and I'm going to say it doesn't prevent video bombing, it reduces the risk. So what this does is only the people you allow into your room will actually come in. Now that means that you have got the ability to assign them a name, so they will only be allowed into your classroom if they use their assigned name. If you don't recognize it, then they don't come in. So I've had this a couple of times. I've had students who have signed in with ridiculous names. They simply haven't been able to access the classroom purely because I didn't recognise who they were, and I want to reduce the risk to other students. So it also lets people test their sound, and I'm able to send out a message to everybody to say, this is what you need to do in order to get ready. So this is what it looks like on Zoom. We have Skype as well, so they're in the same thing. Teams has got something very similar, and Teams and Zoom also allow them to test out their video, their audio, even before they arrive in the call. Ooh. So, random name generator. At the top there, you will see a tiny CC link. This one here is a link to my actual code on REPL. You are very, very welcome to use it. Using random name generator in this case was one way that I stopped my students from taking up 15 minutes to choose their screen name. It was really, really helpful. Basically, all I have got on this one is an adjective list, a noun list, and when I assign them their names, we actually run the code and we look through it. So it's a really nice teaching moment for me to be able to say, actually, we're going to be using a program to assign you a screen name. We're going to embed our digital literacy in there, and we're also looking a little bit of coding as well. Once I've generated their names, this is kept in a spreadsheet a bit like a register. So if you would like to use that tiny CC link and you want to make your own copy, you can click at the very top, there will be a fork. If you click fork, it will then save it into your REPLs, and you will be able to use that as well. But we'll make sure that you've also got the link to it if you wish. You can change the adjectives and nouns. Mine are a little odd. But it's mainly because it's been taken from lists of random names. So teacher video, and I know this is something that I have seen discussed at almost every single chat within social media about running these online lessons, is all to do with teacher videos. A lot of people are feeling a little bit concerned about the video being part of their home and students being able to see into their personal environment. Alternatively, we've also got teachers who have got people walking around as well. So there are a few things to consider at this point. So firstly, who is in our home? Do we know that they're going to disrupt a lesson, or is there anybody in our home that we need to protect in terms of safeguarding ourselves? There is a question of theirs, do we want students actually seeing into our homes? And then also, how do we feel about being on camera? And I don't think we're asked that an awful lot. obviously I'm here on camera to all of you, but the reason why I have essentially just completely ignored the fact that I have this little disc in front of me is because I am on camera for probably 6 hours a day. It is second nature to me, so therefore I am less concerned about how I look in front of a camera. So if you are feeling that you can see your camera and you are starting to sort of check your hair or check out how you look, go, oh no, I'm looking really tired, this is terrifying. It is you and almost every other user on the planet. So please don't be concerned that you sort of looked at yourself and gone, this is horrible. A lot of our VoIP applications have the ability to actually switch your own camera off. And when you can stop seeing yourself, it really does feel a lot better, because all you see is a camera in front of you with a little light on, and you don't really have to worry too much. However, if we're looking in terms of risk assessment, we could probably put this within the care section. And the reason being is that any distress that you are going to be causing is very unlikely, because you are a teacher and you are aware of your surroundings, you are very unlikely to be causing a safeguarding issue. But if somebody that you are aware of in the house or in terms of your surroundings may well cause a mild safeguarding report potentially. So this one can probably go within the green section. So talking of feeling very uncomfortable on camera, one thing I'm not used to is having a video of myself. So I thought I'd do one anyway, feel the fear and put it out there for everybody. So I decided to have a little look at the Zoom section. So at this point, I was actually not screen sharing. I probably should have changed that. I was changing the background. Now you can do this in a multitude of applications. So CAS is not saying to you, go and share this particular piece of software. I happened to be using this particular one. So this one is really useful in terms of virtual backgrounds, and I'm going to play this whilst I explain it. There we go. It's really useful when you haven't tidied your bookcase, or you've got your microbit projects scattered all around the room, which I had at that particular point. However, it is worth being aware that if you are going to use things like virtual backgrounds, they do require a fair bit of processing power, and also either a completely blank background, so not so much a green screen, but a dark blanket is often enough. Or they require a particularly high quality camera. So you can see there for my Minecraft lessons. It's also worth being aware that there are also some backgrounds that are probably not appropriate for our lessons. One thing that I do happen to use quite a lot is a blank background with my logo over the top, but just also, if you're going to use a blank background, be really aware of what you're wearing, otherwise you will turn into Holly from Red Dwarf. So I quite often wear black t-shirts and realise that my black logo probably wasn't a great idea. So it is worth playing around with these before you actually use them. But one thing obviously to be aware of, probably don't need a green screen. The other thing you can do is just to blur the background. Okay, right, so what I'm going to do is to stop and just pause for a second for any questions about that particular point. So we're looking at, up to this point, the issues in terms of actually using the software that we have been given. So using our screen, having students on camera, using their actual names. Okay, if you do have any questions, please do just type them directly into the chat, and we will keep going because we have got 2 more sections to have a look at. But are there any issues with Google Meet? Oh, that's an open question. There we go. Yes and no. I think in terms of Google Meet and Zoom and Teams and essentially anything, you're going to have the same kind of issues. They all are sort of, I'm going to say they're all much of a muchness. They all have very, very similar applications. So rather than considering the actual applications, you may have to actually go back to your school and say, what is it that you want us to use? Because if they're saying use Google Meet, your risk assessment will need to look at what Google Meet actually offers. I believe with Google, because it's Google Meet rather than Hangouts, you can again switch their cameras off, mute them, you can set up a waiting room. Google Meet requires a plugin for a waiting room, and also things like polls, it requires plugins, so you will still need to run that. And I believe with Google Meet they've actually increased it as well, so that you share a specific application rather than your entire screen, which again makes it a lot safer for us because we're not risking that data protection issue. Okay, we've just talked about screen names. So what I'm going to do at this point is I'm not going to dwell on it too long, but we do have to be aware that if we allow our students to identify their own screen names, just like we would do in the classroom, we've all been doing that. So we're focusing particularly now on behaviour. If we do allow students to choose their own screen names, we have to be keeping an eye out for maybe something which is whether they are using discrimination. That kind of impact on a student in a classroom is huge. That kind of impact on a student who has been self-isolating and not talking to their friends for the last 8 weeks is going to be enormous. So just be aware that anything that does happen may well feel that it has been blown much, much larger for our students at this particular point. So in this case, it's entirely likely that a student will choose, if you have a large group, something which somebody else may be offended by. The distress potentially would be moderate unless there is that potential there. So it's just worthwhile bearing in mind. So I spoke to a number of students while I was planning this particular webinar and said, what would you prefer? And the vast majority of them said that they would prefer to be handed a name which was theirs for the duration of their live lessons, and also for other students to be handed a name as well, just so that they had no fear of any kind of online bullying. And I think that that's just something that we can do really, really easily. And because, of course, we're computing teachers, we've got that ability to explain to them how to do it as well. So it's almost a project for them. The other thing that we can do is, I'm going to come back to Suzanne's question in just a second. The other thing we can do is if they fail to use the name that we've given them, and again, I'm using MakeCode at this point because I'm having absolutely tons of fun with it with my online classes, you do have the option of changing their name. So you can forcibly change their name in their VoIP applications. You can forcibly change their screen name in things like MakeCode, in Kahoot. I believe you can do it in Quizlet as well. So making sure that they're using the same thing. And it is just a case of saying, these are my expectations. So in my physical classroom, what I would be doing is all of us would be anyway, we would be setting our expectations. We would have our behaviour charts. We have a particular system that our school has set up. It is entirely likely that your school will also have very similar procedures. So I use a 3-strike system with my online classes, and I do this whether they are for schools or they are for my private tutees as well. So I ask them to follow the rules. So I give them a list of expectations. I will then tell them what that expectation is if I have to identify them twice. And on the 3rd strike, they are muted, they have no video, they have no audio, and they are in watch only mode for the remainder of the lesson. So they are still able to access what I am saying, they are just not able to interact anymore. And any students who are muted, they get an email home from parents. So this is really no different to a 3-strike system in your classroom, where the student is not following their behaviour policy and you place them outside of your classroom. The difference here is that they are still able to access the learning. So they are able to watch, but they cannot disrupt our other students. Okay, so I'm going to come back to Suzanne's question now. So which application do you think is best for live lessons for a class? You've been asked to look into this. Okay. that's you've said it might seem like a silly question. I really don't think it is. Unless you have been presenting to lots of people for a long time, it is absolutely not a silly question. I would probably not advise one particular type of software. I would say look into the best type of software for your particular environment, because it depends on what it is that you are presenting, it depends on what it is that you want to teach, and also what your current school has implemented, and also what technology you have available at home. So applications like Zoom they're brilliant in terms of being able to present to groups. Teams is fabulous for the same reason, but you can then add your documents as well. Google, we've already touched upon a little bit, so we've got some people who are using Google Meet. All of these things do roughly the same thing, but there are elements that some people might prefer. So my personal classes are run on Zoom, whereas some of the ones that I run for local authorities would be run on Teams. And then when I'm diving into schools and supporting them, I'm using a variety. And that's been really exciting because I'm having to sort of kind of pop into all different things. I have to say, doing the CAS Inspire things, so we've got GoToWebinar, this has been brilliant because I've got absolutely everything. The only thing that I would say with the webinar software is that it's quite useful to have 2 screens. So if you are looking at something which you want to make sure all of your students are very much not going to be able to talk to each other, or you want to make sure that you have full control over what is happening, webinar software is really powerful. Okay, student chat. This one is one of my big things. So, and I'm talking at this point about the ability to chat privately, not chat in the open. So when I'm talking about student chat, this is one of the only places where it goes into that red section. This particular one, private chat between students within an online application, is an absolute red line for me. And the reason for that is because I'm not able to monitor what they're saying, and the potential for bullying or the sharing of inappropriate content, and then combine that with the impact upon an individual student is absolutely massive. I put this into the serious, but potentially for some students this would become major. So at that point, having private chats open for students to talk to each other without me monitoring it, absolute no. However, having something which is the ability for students to chat openly, so as if they are in an actual classroom, so I can overhear them, or they can send me messages directly, absolutely brilliant. I have noticed though that we do have some interesting things coming up in some of the class chats. So most VoIP applications will allow you to just disable all chats that isn't public or private. Do have a look at the applications that you're being asked to use, because in some cases there are some VoIP applications that won't allow you to switch off private chat, but you'll need to investigate that. So public chats can be treated as we would do in class. So in this case, I've got a flowchart here from Nicole Lane's blog on dealing with trolling. Some of our students have started to engage with us in ways to attempt to distract as if they would do in class, but that little bit of a separation is encouraging a few students, not many, and I have to say this is the absolute extreme end. And what they're trying to do is they're expecting an emotional reaction. So therefore, I follow this as a flowchart, and I follow my 3-strike system as well. I have to say my 3-strike system doesn't get used very often. However, having something like this just kind of taped to my desk as I go through, because you can feel a little bit overwhelmed when you've got a student who is being silly, and you also have the technology going in and out, and you want to make sure that everything is working really well. There is that potential to just be a little bit concerned that it's all going wrong, and now you've got a student who's being awful. actually having this there helps you to stay calm. Remaining calm as you would do in a classroom. So ultimately, all you are doing is you are applying the same behaviour management techniques in a digital environment. But yeah, I particularly like this one. And actually, us dealing with that kind of behaviour in a digital classroom is then, again, it's modelling to our students how they can behave towards others online. And then they're able to take that as digital literacy and then move on with it as well. So they're actually then implementing it in their own lives. Voice chat is another one that came up in a lot of conversations recently. Interestingly, students are less likely to cause issues when they are using voice chat. So in terms of our risk assessment, this one actually goes into, it's a possible issue, but the issues are generally moderate. So the main issues here is that it tends to be more personal, so they cause less issues. However, the main risk I've had whilst using voice chat is actually overhearing background conversations. We are currently teaching in an environment where our students are logging on, hopefully from areas where they have parents around them. But they are also logging on with parents trying to work and trying to manage their own lives in the background. So if we have their microphones on, I have had a number of situations where parents have had very private conversations within earshot. So in these situations, I use my VoIP application to physically mute that student. And that is one thing that you would want to have within your VoIP application. At that point, you would switch them off and send them a discreet text message to explain, I'm really sorry, I can hear mum or dad over the microphone, just making sure I'm keeping things private for you. Send me a message when you're ready to unmute again. Your alternative is to actually have them completely muted, like we are today, and to then use various different applications. So you can use non-verbal feedback, a bit like we have today with your hands up. And also the ability to go to questions. I'm just scrolling down just to make sure we haven't had any more. So in here, look for options. So these are top tips from people who have been running these online sessions for a long time. Look for things where, especially for your VoIP applications, of entering everybody as muted. So you should be able to set that up as something within your VoIP application. The ability to actually prevent your participants, or your students in this case, from unmuting themselves. So it's all very well being able to mute everybody, but you want something that stops them from just unmuting. And also using non-verbal communication. So I've got a couple of screen captures of here of how you can do that. So you can actually set, so this is in Zoom, you can set things up on there to stop them from unmuting themselves and also stopping them from renaming themselves. And then you've also got, so this one is in Skype for Business, so you can mute your entire audience and then also hiding their names as well, which is really useful. And again, WebEx has got the ability to mute on entry and also identifying that nobody on there can share. So this is going back to what we were saying at the beginning, stopping people from sharing their screens over the top of what you're trying to do. So, and again on this one, so this one was really interesting. This was in Teams. So in Teams, you can have your main screen, but you can also join your Teams conversation on your phone. You can have the audience and you can set them in groups and you can mute those groups as well. So non-verbal communication is something that we've been using in here. So hands up is really useful. You might want to get students to answer a question. Hands up works exactly the same as it would do in here. What we don't have in this one is the ability to do things like thumbs up, thumbs down, clicking yes and no, but also things like going slower and faster as well. And a number of different webinar pieces of software do have that. So it's worthwhile going in and having a look to see what your VoIP applications allow you to do. The one that I really like is the I need a break. And we don't often give that to our students in classes because those classes are set hours. But I have found that lots of students, if they're engaging in a lot of online conversations, and it's not just students, it's us too, you get a little bit of just sort of screen, we end up exhausted. We need a break occasionally. So occasionally we may well just say, look, I need a pause, allow the student 5 minutes, just obviously being aware that they're not watching. So if you are using something like GoToWebinar, you can see who is not attentive, and I particularly love this. You can do this on a number of VoIP applications. They track to see whether that person has all this particular screen live right now, or whether you've been minimized and they're looking at something else. So if you are concerned about your students who are potentially joining your lessons but actually probably off on Roblox or something like that, and I am aware Roblox at the moment is a big thing with secondary schools, who knew? Being able to see who is actually attentive is really, really helpful. So using that non-verbal communication is going to be really powerful for you as teachers. Okay, so in terms of addressing behaviour, I'm going to stop again just for a couple of minutes and give you a little bit of a chance to type in some questions. Anything that you want to ask in terms of how to take your in-person classroom behaviour management and turn it digital, or any questions that you want to ask in terms of using the software to manage behaviour. An interesting question at this point is anybody actually using behaviour management software? So I know that there's quite a lot out there where you can actually award points or badges for good behaviour. For primary, that's been absolutely fabulous. And I know that a lot of primary schools are awarding these badges for brilliant behaviour in their live lessons. Not so much obviously for secondary. Okay, just keeping an eye on the questions. Okay, right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on. Again, if you've got questions, please do just pop them straight in. So this one I haven't done as a risk assessment, and the reason being is at this point this is more of a discussion. So in terms of the responsibility of recordings, some schools, and in fact many schools now, will actually ask you to record your live sessions for a number of reasons. The main three that are given are safeguarding, access to classes for students later on, and also observations. So this is always going to be a contentious issue. So the one thing that we would say is when you are in doubt of anything in terms of recording or these live lessons, please refer to your school policies or your teaching union policies. So we are here to present you with ideas, ways to deal with things, rather than advice on whether you can or should. So I'm going to be focusing very much on the first two bullet points. So I'm going to focus on the safeguarding and focusing on how students have access to this later. I'm not touching on observations, probably because I'm a bit scared of going anywhere near it as a conversation. In terms of our comfort zones, I've already talked about how we feel comfortable on camera. We need to be aware that it takes time for both us and for our students to actually feel comfortable on camera. And also it helps us feel more comfortable when we know why and where that recording is going, because that really, really helps with the process. So again, I went to Twitter and had a little look. So where you are being asked to record a class, your school really needs to write to parents and explain why and how those recordings are actually happening. That may well come from you. It's more likely to come from SLT. So this comes under the same as your recording policy as recording observations in school. So they should be held somewhere safe. This came from a teacher, and I got two really, really different responses in this one. The teacher was absolutely terrified, but they were overcoming their fear of actually being on camera rather than their fear of teaching. It is a very different process. And it's worthwhile being aware that your first few lessons may well be a little bit interesting, but knowing that you should, just like an observation, you just keep going. Try the same thing more than once. If it doesn't work the first time, don't assume it's not going to work ever. It might be that you need to tweak it, or you might need to feel more comfortable with it. So prepare something that you might want to record more than once. But when you are recording a lesson, please make sure that students are aware first. A couple of VoIP applications will actually have something which is an audio identification that this meeting is being recorded, and you will find that actually that works really well. If you don't tell your students that they are being recorded, we end up with things like this. This particular person obviously got the little beep that said this meeting is being recorded, but they weren't aware why. So therefore they just thought that they were being watched, and they weren't very happy about the whole thing. Had that student potentially been told this is actually to protect both you and the teacher, it's not being shared with anybody, it's going to go somewhere safe, then potentially they would have felt a lot better about it. Some of us are looking at taking our classes, recording them, and taking it again to the next stage. So taking it not just recording, but actually streaming, this is where huge safeguarding may well come in. So this is where no cameras, no audio, text is off camera. I do take some of my very, very small groups and I do stream them for students. However, all of those parents are aware that that is what is about to happen. The students are previously warned that this is about to happen, and I have everything on one screen, and the other screen is then sent out. However, we also need to be aware that some students actually can't access our VoIP applications. So we're talking about these live interactive lessons, but it is worthwhile being aware that some of our students are working from devices that quite clearly cannot handle even basic VoIP applications. So creating a video of your class and allowing them to access either a streamed version or a later version may well be really useful for them. But it does, when I'm streaming, it changes the teaching style absolutely dramatically. I've noticed that my streams have evolved over the last few months because I've been doing them regularly, I've been doing them more often. So my technology has got better. The more I practice this, the better I am at it. So that's one of the major reasons why I record a lot of my group sessions, is actually not so much for safeguarding, although it is in the back of my head, but it's actually for my students who can't turn up at the time, and they're still then able to access the learning, maybe not in as much detail, so that they can't ask questions, they're not going to be able to ask me to slow down or to speed up, but they are able to access at least something, and they can see and they can hear us. But for safeguarding, there is 3 major areas. It is a second pair of eyes. A lot of people have been a little bit nervous about recording the lesson because potentially they're sort of looking at it and going, well, actually that's then there forever. But in terms of safeguarding, the idea for this one is that firstly, you give them an announcement to say that it is being recorded so everybody knows. The recording should be held in a secure repository. So this is there to protect you as well, because of course you are streaming your live lessons from your homes. So at that point, and some of you obviously are doing this from your classrooms as well, at that point, because you are not so much sort of in a little secure space, it does protect you. When we talk about secure repository, that should not be your personal devices. So these should be put into either your school. You should have school servers. Your school may well have set up some secure online storage. So some VoIP software, this will actually be recording and placing it for 30 days onto a secure server. Before running a live lesson, please, please, please go and talk to your school and ask them where they are going to be storing the recordings. They should be held for 30 days. and then after the 30 days, they are generally deleted. In terms of a safeguarding incident, you are expected to hold those documentations for 30 days. So holding things on your particular machine can cause a data protection issue, because of course you are holding student data. You're also probably going to find that if you have a school laptop and you are recording onto your laptop, you're going to run out of space very, very quickly. So you need to be talking to your school, make sure that you obviously have a policy in place for making sure that you have somewhere to put those recordings, where they're going to go, how you're going to upload them. And obviously, in terms of making sure that if you are uploading them, are they being uploaded using a secure medium as well? So are they encrypted as they go up? My final one, you'll be pleased to know, because this was a bit death by PowerPoint today, was, can we prevent students from recording? And I hate ending on one of those low notes. Unfortunately, ultimately, if a student is going to record their screen, there is very, very little we can do about it from a technology perspective. So we have things like free screen capture software like OBS. PowerPoint has this now built into it. So if somebody is absolutely hell-bent on recording your lesson as it goes out, there is very little we can do. So this actually needs to become part of your behaviour policy. It is incredibly difficult to give a positive message on this, because actually the VoIP security is far, far behind that of the screen capturing facilities, because screen capture has been out there and has been promoted for years and years. And we haven't caught up with it with our VoIP applications, because of course they've only been massively in use for the past couple of months. The majority of our VoIP applications do have the option to prevent others from streaming it directly, but unfortunately, yeah, we do have to make sure. And again, if you go talk to SLT, talk to those around you, talk to your IT departments to look into potential ways to reduce what would be shared. So things like switching off your students' cameras and names does mean if somebody is going to record their screen, we're at least not providing a safeguarding issue. If you don't feel comfortable with having yourself recorded, and you know that there is the potential for students recording, you don't potentially need to have your camera on. You could just present, like I've done today, with a PowerPoint up there and a whiteboard. And that leads me on to what we're doing next week. So next week, I will be looking at using tools for actually presenting to our students. So those would be interactive whiteboards and our collaborative tools to help us teach our theory lessons in computer science. And with 2 minutes to go, I'm going to hand over to Beverly. Thank you so much for watching and bearing with me for the entire hour.
Thank you, Holly. Thank you so much. And thank you to everyone who's joined us online today. As Holly's mentioned, we've got some more exciting titles coming up. So I'm very much looking forward to finding out about collaborative whiteboards while teaching, and also about teaching group Python programming online. Yes. So there's lots of exciting titles coming up. Please also have a look at the CAS website. There's some sessions on Thursday. So there are lots of sessions running across this summer term, which are all a part of the CAS Inspire Showcase. If you're tweeting or using any social media, please do remember to use hashtag CAS Inspire 20. And it just remains to say thank you very much, Holly. Thank you everyone for joining us, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Okay, see you next week.
Bye. Bye.